Hey Brian, how are you?
I'm well. Nice to see you, sir.
You too. You got dressed up more corporate than I did for this.
I was so excited to put on a jacket for this because this has made my week, Mark. It has made my week.
Well, I'm glad we participated in that, and I think I may have told you I kind of try. Now we're in all our headquarters, our home office headquarters, and I try to distinguish now between Saturday and Friday. So I wear shoes and running shoes during the week, and then I get my flip flops on Saturday morning to know it's the weekend. So great to have you. Could you just briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Brian Finlay, and I am the president and CEO of a public policy think tank in Washington called the Stimson Center. And Stimson's been around, Mark, as you know, for 30 years. We work on really a broad cross-section of issues. I think what defines us as an organization really is really two things. One, we're rabidly nonpartisan, which, as you know, living and working in Washington, D.C. is no longer easy. And as importantly, we have a fierce commitment to pragmatism. So we don't just research and write reports. We really roll up our sleeves, get our hands dirty. We roam the globe looking for problems to solve and looking for partnerships to build to solve those problems. And we work, as I say, in a really broad cross-section of issues, from nuclear non-proliferation to climate resilience to food security to protecting civilians in conflict in sub-Saharan Africa.
So the total opposite extreme from Dear Abby.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right.
Nice. And one key point is makes you perfect for the job with respect to global relationships is you're Canadian.
It is. So I'm glad you brought that up, because for those that are listening, sometimes that there's there's a little sort of hint of something in my voice that I have not had a stroke. I am in fact Canadian, and that will explain why I can properly, Mark, and you can identify with this, pronounce out, about, and house correctly.
Absolutely. I was going to say, what are you talking about, eh? No, it's great to have you and to talk about some of the amazing stuff that you're doing. Let's start with that infamous why that became famous. What's yours, and why do you do what you do?
It's a great question. You had a little bit teed me up for this, and as I sat kind of thinking about it, I realized, God, I never really contemplated that question before. Oddly, what occurs to me when you ask that, Mark, are a couple things. One, that I realize that I'm a bit of a spastic person. I think that I can't. I'm unable to relax, and I need to see the consequences of my action up front, whether I'm working in the garden or working with diplomats in Nigeria. That there's an urgency in me to not just solve problems, but to see the consequences of my actions up close. I also really had the opportunity kind of early on in my educational career to live and study abroad, and growing up in a relatively small city in Canada, kind of a provincial town, that wonderful place to grow up, but it does not expose you to the big wide world. And so it wasn't really until I went abroad that I realized just how remarkable and diverse the world is. I knew that I had to explore that and try to get my arms around it and take part in it. And then the last thing I would say, Mark, is I and maybe this is my Canadian spirit coming out. I have an intense dislike for division, for argument and conflict, and it occurs to me that as we look not just in our own country but around the world, that division is everywhere, right? It's Republicans and Democrats. It's the left and the right. It's the global north and the developing south. It's divisions between government and private industry. It's divisions between big companies and small companies. That everywhere we look, our society is unfortunately rife with conflict and division. And what is astonishing when you think about those conflicts in a little bit more nuanced way is that at the end of the day, we all kind of want the same thing. So it's remarkable how we have invented division in some cases for reasons that are apparent to no one. And so I really wanted to try to play a role in kind of managing some of that conflict and division, helping people realize that we have so much more in common than in fact we have that divides us wherever we are, and how we might exploit some of those commonalities in a way to solve big problems around the world.
It's interesting. I won't go into too long a story because can end up doing that sometimes. But I always found growing up in Montreal that we weren't told that diversity is a good thing. It just was, and it's kind of an interesting feeling now when I look back. There was just all this stuff about an intent to be with people that are different all the time, and it was an amazing way to grow up. And so I kind of get what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I so identify with that. I mean, for me growing up, and I grew up in London, Ontario, near Toronto, and as you know, and we most people looked exactly like me. But there was that exposure when you would go to the largest, when you go to Montreal, when you went to Toronto, and realize what wildly multicultural places they were, and how cohesion and sometimes division sort of helped formulate our culture in just unique and sometimes pretty inspiring ways.
Yeah, there's a great book called The Game by Ken Dryden, which talks about how the players who were all from different places were feeling during the referendum to split or not to split from Canada. So a little book recommendation.
So this is sliding quickly into a conversation referencing Ken Dryden. This is the first interview I've ever done, Mark. Congratulations, where Ken Dryden's name has come up. That's fantastic.
A Cornell graduate. We the U.S. into it. He's a Cornell graduate. It's funny then that it's almost taken decades for where corporate brands have aligned with social impact, and now they're finding it's vital for attracting talent and keeping talent, but they've also found it's really good for business. So with respect to that, what's your thoughts on that, and what differentiates you then from what you're saying you like to do as one of the leaders who care?
I mean, that's a big question, Mark, and I want to be humble in my response to it, because obviously there are leaders that are making a significant difference everywhere around, including in my own organization and in virtually every other organization, government office around the world. For us, I think, a couple of things strike me when you ask that question, Mark. It occurs to me, and this is in the corporate context, and then I can spin back to some of the stuff that we're doing and how we're thinking about it. But I think that, if you go back in even the not too distant history, for those in the corporate world, making a difference really meant hiring the most handsome guy or beautiful woman that you could find, putting them in charge of your corporate social responsibility bureau, so that they can hand computers out to third graders in needy communities in your own country or around the world. And I think the really wise and forward-leaning companies, and the ones that are going to survive in the new economy, are those that are thinking about social engagement in a radically different way. That they're thinking about, of course, every company wants to do good, right? It's a natural thing. We're human, but they want to do good just as much as leaders in the nonprofit industry or leaders in government want to do good. They have a different set of responsibilities in those two sectors, and that is good. And I think we should recognize and embrace those differences. But at the end of the day, they want to achieve good, and I think that those kind of forward-leaning leaders in the corporate sphere are recognizing that it is not just good PR, but it's good business development, right? Engaging in these kind of big, grand global issues, and we can talk about some of them, in a way that not just inspires their own workforce in terms of competitiveness, as you referenced, Mark, but also I think that kind of build new markets for their products in innovative ways that they can do well by doing good. I think at the end of the day, we tend to think, and my career has always been in government initially, and then in the nonprofit sector. But we've always tended to think, I think, from those sectors' vantage points in the corporate world, is that corporations are just informed by greed, and it's so small-minded, I think, to assume that. It's also incorrect in that, for many of these leaders, they are as actively involved in working to make the world a better place. And if we can help facilitate new partnerships that both allow them to do what they're supposed to be doing, which is making money and making jobs, and also throw off a byproduct of achieving social good in some way, then that is the perfect trifecta. And I think that it's irresponsible of us, either in government or in the nonprofit world, to be shaking our finger at industry rather than offering them a hand of partnership to figure out how we can best leverage what they want to accomplish and what we want them to accomplish into what government or the nonprofit sector seeks to accomplish as well.
So it's almost that you're saying, certainly the only way to get creative partnerships is to have an open arms and figure out a way to have good, creative, innovative partnerships. And in a way, a lot of leaders have wanted to care, but there was so much pressure on quarterly financial results and shareholder value that maybe they didn't have the time or whatever to care, some more than others, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And with respect to that, I think, and you guys create a lot of innovative, effective partnerships between corporate and nonprofit, between corporate and doing good, that they are realizing also it is good for their profit and good for their employees and so on. Considering the speed of things changing over the last X years, technology and otherwise, and now with COVID-19 being here, I assume you'd agree, there's kind of like an awakening of, what is the meaning of all this? What is most important? What social and economic impact is being had right now or speeded up again, based on COVID-19. So with all that said, how do you view the future of work? How do you view the future of business? And in particular, one thing you're very involved in, the partnerships between everybody.
Yeah. So as I say, the most enlightened companies are the ones who are, I think, viewing these partnerships in really radical and innovative ways. It strikes me when you ask that question, Mark, that we've tended to organize our world because it's a complicated place vertically, right? That we all are at the top of our straws, kind of looking down the silo. And unfortunately, the world has become so much more complex and interconnected than it has ever been in all of human history today, and it's only getting more and more complicated. So to solve, a seemingly simple. Oh, we're getting some feedback. I'm sorry. To solve a relatively simple problem that may be related to, the environmental consequence of, overfishing off the coast of West Africa. Some may look at that and say, well, that's really it's an environmental problem, right? Well, other people will say, well, it's really an environmental problem. It's an economic issue. It's an economic development issue. Others would say, well, actually, it's not really either of those. It's a security issue because those fishermen who are no longer able to fish are now, maybe they turn to piracy, maybe they turn to organized crime, maybe they turn to, and other people, right? So we have so many vectors into problems, and the truth is that they're all right? That it's all of those problems. The challenge, I think, for industry, for government, for nonprofits, is to figure out how we look at the world instead of down the stovepipe. How do we begin to look at the world more horizontally? And it's in that regard, I think, that sort of the future of business and successful business at least those that are more actively engaged in not just making money and making jobs, but also in contributing to solving big global problems, is to, again, devise partnerships with communities, not just government, nonprofit, or with other businesses, but horizontally across issues. So you might imagine, that seafood company that is suddenly involved in a security program and leveraging, a global development resource in a consortium to solve that challenge of illegal and unregulated fishing, because it's in their interests and it's also in the interests of the wider community. Those, I think, are the really successful businesses that can think through that in a much more savvy and nuanced way to ultimately contributing to not just making more money, but improving the human condition. That is, I think, the future space where, as I say, the future of work, not only in kind of engaged workforces, but in terms of revenue, is ultimately going to be derived.
Yeah, it's interesting. Chance to segue a little bit with, it's complicated, and yet I had a Deloitte partner years ago when I started and told me brilliance is simple, and he just left it with me that I've got to figure that out, type of thing. And it is complicated, but he's right. It's actually simple. And I published an article on LinkedIn recently. I mentioned my grandparents, and I think most grandparents probably say this. They would say, as long as we have our health, that's the most important. And they started with that, right? Because isn't that the number one thing? Like you said before, we all want the same thing. If you don't have the health, then the rest of it doesn't matter, no matter how much money you make or this, that, or whatever, all that. And with respect to with respect to what leaders who care, again, about the financial, the physical, the mental well-being of their employees, can you talk about that? And can you talk about why it's important for their business and why that's important to positively, as you said then, impact the community? The whole point of it going back to the community, the fishing village or whatever. So caring about your employees, again, the economic, the physical, and the mental health of them, how that will impact and be better or worse, whichever you think it would be, for the business, and then going down to the community.
Yeah, it's such a great, I love that question, Mark, for a number of different reasons. In part because, as we sit here in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, we're beginning to see how, those leaders and companies that care, and how they are reaching out and engaging their respective workforces, how that is so fundamentally coloring the attitudes of their workforces toward industry, and vice versa. And the successful ones, right, are the ones who are kind of building those more effective collaborations with their workforce. And as we get beyond the crisis, I think just from a competitiveness standpoint, they're going to be the ones who are most likely able to attract and retain the workforce of the 21st century that we're all going to require, right? They're going to benefit from this kind of rolling snowball of engagement and collaboration with their workforce. So that's one important point, that it's just core to their self-interest, their economic self-interest, their ability to do business. But I think even more important than that, they're also the ones, Mark, in my view, and I've so seen this in my engagement with private industry, not just in this country, but literally around the world, that those companies that are the most successful in their communities, again, are the ones who are able, and it's not easy, to pick their head up a little bit and make their industry not just about maximizing shareholder value at the end of the day, but looking a little bit beyond and a little bit kind of helping to shape the future space that their businesses are moving into. I think back to a conversation I had with a gentleman from the pharmaceutical industry many years ago. And we were talking about vaccines and the provision of vaccines, especially to orphan diseases and the like. And he said to me, he said, Brian, as I looked back, he was kind of getting near the point of retirement. And he said, as I look back on my career, when I entered this space, when I was a young man in my 20s, the industry was really, the leaders of the industry were, they had risen through the industry. They were at the science bench, and they moved through the company and eventually grew up to be CEO. And they had this long-term view of, we're researching this today, and this is not going to be a product tomorrow or next week or by the end of the quarter. It's going to be 10 years before we see something come out of this research. So they were long-term thinkers. And over time, it was his observation that many of those had been replaced by the sales and marketing folks, right? So we bring a very different, equally relevant, but a very different mentality, right? That because their job was, what do the numbers look like at the end of the quarter, and how is Wall Street going to respond? And over time, the leaders of those companies shifted, right, from those who grew up on the science side to those who grew up on the sales and marketing side. And I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but the consequence was, and we can see it, I think, is that industry sort of grew further and further away from their client base. They became less attuned to thinking about kind of the long-term implications of their actions or their business, and more attuned to solving very close near-term problems. And it's had consequences, I think. As we can see playing out now. So this is all to say, I'm sort of a rambling answer, but it is all to say, I think, that it's those companies that are attuned to be thinking a little bit more broadly that will ultimately benefit, I think, in the out years to having built new markets and being kind of the leading edge of that business development activity. And that part of that leading edge is in contributing to and solving big social problems where their business acumen is really essential.
And I compare it to a sports team a lot. The coach that tells the player when he makes a mistake and then tells him to get back on the ice or back on the field, or the boss that doesn't fire the guy or gal that made a mistake, but gets a major return on investment by saying, hey, you made a mistake, okay, how are we going to fix it? Those are the players that then have an absolute loyalty to the leaders who care about them to make stuff happen, including in the community. Because the employees are your whole force. They can go out to the community and make stuff happen. So, caring does work. Agreed. Yeah. So speaking of caring, last thing, we're in teacher, two key elements that we always talk about since John F. Kennedy. We're still trying to figure out: education and healthcare. It's Teachers Appreciation Day today. Hey. It's Nurses Day and Week starting tomorrow. How appropriate is that for the time we're in, that people are home with their kids thinking, and even the kids are saying, I can't wait to go back to school. And the nurses are like heroes, again, for what they do. What do you say to that? Boy, so true, right? It's so true. I think it's a nice reminder, Mark, of the influence that we all have in our own ways, right? That the circumstances shifted, and the much maligned profession of being a professional educator or the dismissed profession of being a nurse, we're suddenly reminded of how critical and essential both of those professions are. And I think that, to extrapolate from that, it is the case in virtually every profession, right? That we tend to take in the good times everyone's profession and everyone's contribution a little bit for granted. And it's not until we are a little bit shaken and realize that everyone in some way is making such a critical contribution to this larger tapestry. And the question, I think, for all of us is, one, how do we recognize that on a regular basis when we don't have a crisis? But as importantly, how do we leverage one another more effectively to lift one another up? Again, because getting back to the theme at the outset, Mark, we all want the same thing at the end of the day. So how do we kind of mutually achieve that in a way that that recognizes, that uplifts, and more importantly, leverages the talent and capacities of everyone, irrespective of the profession that you're sitting in? You know, to quote that famous philosopher Kobe Bryant, he said it a lot, but it came out even more after he passed away. But I remember saying a lot. He said everybody has that dream, the championship, whatever, the dream is all over there. He said the dream is actually right now. Is the dream. Working out in the gym, doing this, doing that. That's the dream, and we should recognize that, and the people that are with us.
No, agreed. Could not agree more.
So, way to go, eh? Good interview. Really appreciate you being here, and I know we can go on forever. We'll have to do the sequel sometime soon.
I'll look forward to it, sir.
All right. Keep making a difference.
Thanks, Mark.
See ya.